This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
Who's got it better than us?
Nobody.
You got a date with justice.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome into another edition of the Justice Report on the Detroit Sports Podcast Network. I am your host, Brandon Justice. Happy to be here. Happy for you to be listening. Happy for it to be still hot outside as we creep toward the middle of October. So just to give you a little more info on myself, I write about recruiting and Michigan Wolverines in general on Land10.com. We have an app on the Apple Store. Android's coming soon. And then the Detroit Sports Podcast Network. You found us on either iTunes or Podbean or Podomatic, whatever it may be. So we thank you for listening. Tell your friends, tell your mom and dad, tell everybody that you can. So we're diving into what's coming up on Saturday. I guess you could call it what's coming up. It's a game against Rutgers. It's really not much to talk about that's really going to be very dramatic by any means. It's much different than last week, is the good way to put it. Today, they take on the Scarlet Knights in Piscataway, New Jersey. It's their first road game, so that's a topic of discussion that we could probably dive into a little bit. But outside of that, they're facing a team that isn't really any good. I'm not sure if they're ever going to be any good for as long as they last in the Big Ten. Still questioning why they're in the Big Ten. Still questioning why they were ever invited to the Big Ten. But they're here, and it's a game on the schedule, and worse things have happened. So there's a chance. There's always a chance that a team comes out flat. So just to dive into what happened last week, I think that's something that we could definitely touch on a little bit more. That might, push this to be a little bit more entertaining than a topic about Rutgers. But before we even go into that, Rutgers lost their best receiver this week. I think it was last week, actually. So that just dilutes the offense even more for them. What's left of it. I want to say they had 3 completions last week against Ohio State. I think they went 3 of 16. They lost, obviously. It's 58-0. That's in the horseshoe, and it's tough to win there in general. But to lose 58-0, plus, Chris Ash, buddies with Urban Meyer, came from the Ohio State staff, head coach of Rutgers now. It looked like he took it easy on him. So I think Ohio State probably could have put up a couple of more touchdowns. If you ask me, I don't think Jim Harbaugh is really going to take it easy on Chris Ash just with some of the things he had to say during the offseason. So this one could get a little ugly. Obviously, there was the off-the-field recruiting battles going on between Michigan and Rutgers heading into last season. And then now there's not really any going on right now, but the whole Fence the Garden movement that Chris Ash was trying to start to keep all of the recruits in New Jersey. Obviously, Rashawn Gary, New Jersey's best ever, one of America's best recruits ever, obviously with the Wolverines now. That really didn't work out. Now they're starting a new one, and it's called Stripe the Birthplace. Apparently, this has something to do with the Rutgers Scarlet Knights being the first ever football team, along with, what was the other team? Do we know what the other team is? The other team that Rutgers started football with? Providence. They started with Providence. It was Providence and Rutgers, I'm almost positive. And now they're starting the Stripe the Birthplace movement, so they're going to have this all honored during the game on today, I should say. And, these whole hashtag movements really haven't worked out too well for Rutgers. As we pointed out, Fence the Garden, they're continuing to lose people in New Jersey. They're getting the 3 stars out of New Jersey, but, the really good kids, Drew Singleton this season, he's a 4-star linebacker from Paramus Catholic. He's not going to stay in state. He's between Michigan and Clemson. Last year, we obviously saw Rashawn Gary and all those guys go elsewhere. Now, it did kind of turn out well because Amir Mitchell was a guy committed to Michigan, enrolled at Michigan, an early enrollee at Michigan from New Jersey. He's now on Rutgers. Obviously, he transferred from Michigan, but there was a pending suspension that was, about to occur there. He obviously didn't want to get suspended, so he decided to leave. But, if you're Rutgers, the hashtags, I wonder if they're ever going to stop. And it's just really not working out for them. And I think this whole Stripe the Birthplace thing, it's cool. It has a good meaning behind it. It has it doesn't really have anything to do with beating Michigan. It just kind of has something to do with the history of the program that kind of stopped back when it started. Didn't really have much momentum after that. But for what it's worth, I'm pretty sure they won that first game too. That was probably their last meaningful win. But so Rutgers, Michigan, that's what we're talking about today. And we're going to talk about Wisconsin too when we come back. This is the Justice Report on the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
I want to tell you about our newest sponsor, Team Top Cat Sales. Are you looking for team apparel for your high school, your club sports team, or corporation? Look no further than Top Cat Sales, located on the east side of Main Street in downtown Royal Oak between 11 and 12 Mile. Through founder and former University of Michigan QB John Wangler's leadership, Top Cat Sales has developed a tradition of selling and distributing custom Adidas team apparel with the highest quality and best service. Get your organization, school, or club team all in with Adidas today by going to topcatteamsales.com. That's topcatteamsales.com. Also, follow Top Cat on Twitter at Team Top Cat.
Who's got it better than us? Who's got it better than us?
All right, welcome back to the Justice Report on the Detroit Sports Podcast Network. You know, I had a really interesting commute here today. I was on my way to the studios, whatever you would like to call it here, and I believe this is Sterling Heights, correct? And I was stopped by a mobile home. Now, that might sound a little bit odd, but that's actually what happened. I was on my way. I was on 23. I come from Ann Arbor, so I have to take 23 north, which has to connect me to like 3 different highways. I have to take 23 to 96, 75. It's really interesting and kind of annoying at times, but as soon as I hit 23, there was a loading truck, whatever you want to call it, that had a mobile home on it. It had 2 mobile homes, and both of them decided to not cooperate, and they decided to fall off in the middle of the highway. So they had to stop everybody at the side of the road. You know, it was very inconvenient, to say the least. So, an interesting thing. You don't really see that too often in Ann Arbor. It was probably just outside of Ann Arbor at that point, but definitely not something you see every day. But it's definitely something that would happen to me, especially in a timely commute that I needed. So, let's start off by talking about last week, Michigan-Wisconsin, first top 10 matchup. Last year, Michigan had Ohio State at home. If you're looking at the coaches poll, that was a top 10 matchup. That was number whatever. I think Ohio State was number 4 or 5, and Michigan was number 10. But if you look at any other poll, Michigan was number 11 or 12. So that was the first time that they had one in the Big House, I believe, since 2006. That was the last time they won one, too, and it was actually against Wisconsin as well. It was the last time they beat a top 10 team. So last week was a lot different than this week, just because, everyone kind of predicted Michigan to win that game. They had the matchups. A lot of people predicted them to blow them out. I saw S&P Plus, Bill Connolly said that Michigan was going to win like 49-10 or something like that, and the computers basically predicted Michigan to put up 49 and only give up 7 or 10 points. They were pretty close to putting up a lot. If they don't miss those 3 field goals, they win 23-7. The amount of times they got past the 50 and didn't do anything, I think it was 9 times. They went past the 50 9 times. They only scored on it twice. They only scored twice when they went past the 50. So you add in those 3 field goals and maybe just score one more time. It's a 30-7 game. So got to execute. That's the number one thing that you got to take away from this game if you're Michigan. You won. You beat Wisconsin. Wisconsin I think it's a great team. I think what you saw on the field on Saturday definitely proved how good they were. They beat Michigan State in East Lansing 30-6, no matter how bad Michigan State kind of looks right now. And either way to go into East Lansing and win by that amount and just dominate from the first possession, that's a team that no matter what the win is, no matter what the margin was, it looks good. It's not like they went out against, say, Rutgers and only won by 7 and only put up 14. They went up against Wisconsin, who has a top 3 defense in the conference, along with Michigan and Ohio State. Right now, Michigan and Ohio State looks the best, obviously, because Michigan just beat Wisconsin. But at the same time, you have to remember, I think all 3 of these defenses have elements to them that are better than the other. I think Wisconsin has the best group of linebackers. Michigan has probably the best defensive line. And then Ohio State has the best secondary. So that's kind of, you're getting really the top look at all 3. But the story of that game for Michigan was obviously the defense. Wisconsin doesn't have any sort of great, threatening offense. I didn't think they were going to put up more than 14 points, or maybe 17 points. But for how much Michigan dominated on the defensive side of the ball, it's kind of a little bit, I wouldn't call it scary by any means, but it's pretty legit. That'd probably be a good word to say. If you're looking at the stats here, they had 159 total yards. That is a Big Ten matchup where the other Big Ten team, who isn't, like a bottom tier or bottom feeder of the Big Ten, Wisconsin is a top 10 team. They were number 8 in the country, well deserving of the ranking as well, and they only put up 159 yards. Mind you, there was 2 drives, I believe, where that pretty much summed up the entire day for them. Let's see. So they had a drive that went for 37 yards, and they had a drive that went for 31 yards. That was the 2 longest drives of the day. The 31-yard drive was the touchdown drive where Wilton Speight threw the pick, and they took it back to obviously the 31-yard line. So their touchdown drive wasn't really a touchdown drive. That's a point off turnover. That's how they pretty much beat Michigan State, was points off turnovers. And, they got the one against Michigan with the Spate pick. They took it back to the 31. They scored. So they didn't have one drive go for more than 40 yards. So they didn't cover half the field the entire day. They didn't get to the 50 the entire day. They didn't have to on that drive where they had the 31, so I guess you can't really take too much away from that. I mean, they probably maybe could have. I mean, that drive was capped off with like a 20-yard touchdown pass. That was the wheel route that he ran. That drive could have been one that went for that, but at the same time, it's just, there was how many other drives? 13 other drives where they could have done something, and they didn't. They had, they had 2 drives go for negative, one with -3, the other for -8, and they had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 go for under 10 yards. They had 5 3-and-outs, basically. You had 5 3-and-outs, and you had 2 go for negative. So half of your drives, you didn't get a first down. You didn't get any yards past 10. That's pretty much, that's a good definition of domination on the defensive side of the ball. That is, Wisconsin, like I said, not really the best offense that you're going to see all season if you're Michigan, obviously. They're very traditional, but Michigan just matched up well. They played Big Ten football. They played smash mouth football, and that's what's going to happen. That's why I think Michigan can run the table in the Big Ten, because they're facing all smash mouth. Besides Indiana, besides Ohio State, pretty much every team they're facing is under center smash mouth football, like classic Big Ten football. That's why I thought they were going to win this game. That's why I thought they were going to win by more than 7, which they should have if they could kick a field goal. But then again, you can't really invest too much into that when they didn't win by that much. But if you just look at the defensive side of the ball, not to mention 3 of those drives ended in picks. And on the last 6 drives, 4 of them were punts. 1 of them went further than 10 yards. 2 of them went for a pick. So you had the first 4 that went for a punt went for 7 yards, 16 yards, -3 yards, and 7. And then the 2 picks, there was 3 yards before the pick, and then there was 0 yards in the last drive. As we all know, Jordan Lewis did what Jordan Lewis does, and went up and got that pick, whether he should have batted away or not. Probably should have. But, if he gets the ball back, Michigan probably just hands it up the middle and they score. They win 21-7. It looks better, but, he's also not known for possibly one of the better interceptions of all time. So, and if you look at Michigan's side of the ball, on offense, they had a drive that went, the touchdown drive went for 77 yards. They had another drive go for 64 yards. They had another drive go for 64 yards, which is kind of weird to tell you. It's a weird number to have the exact one on. They had a 42-yard drive, a 43-yard drive, so it really wasn't any sort of great offensive day. They only put up 14 points, but certainly a lot better than Wisconsin's no drives that went over 50. And actually, they didn't have any drives go over 40 yards. The longest drive they had was 37. For Michigan, they had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 that went past 40. So, either way, that was just a defensive battle. That's just kind of the gist of it. And this week, Michigan probably gets back on the offensive side of the ball. I think they're going to run all over Rutgers. They might do the same thing they did against Penn State and get the 350 rushing yards again. Michigan does that. When they see what a team's defensive weakness is, they don't have a strong suit in their offense where they think, their passing game isn't better than their running game. Their running game isn't better than passing game. It just depends on who they're playing, and that's what they attack. That's why I think they're going to run the ball over the place on today with probably Chris Evans. Chris Evans favors well against this defense. I think he's going to have a huge day, the true freshman. So as far as how Spate did, he was conservative, as he's always going to be, good, not great, but he didn't really make any mistakes besides the one pick. Obviously, the pick cost them the 7 points off turnover, but if you're just relying on 7 points for your offense, then you're not going to win any ball games past this one. So he went 20 of 32, 219 yards and a touchdown, had a 124 QB rating, not bad. When you look on the other side of the ball, Alex Hornibrook only completed 9 passes. So he went 9 of 25, 88 yards, a touchdown, and 3 interceptions. And then you look at the running game, and Corey Clement, who's supposed to be a really good running back, only had 68 yards on 17 attempts. Michigan held him to 71 yards rushing, so they didn't have over 100 yards passing or rushing, obviously, finishing with only 159. But then you got to look at time of possession, where Michigan had the ball 11 minutes more. So they had 35 minutes, 41 seconds with the ball, where Wisconsin only had 24 minutes. And then Michigan, they had 21 first downs to Wisconsin's 8. So what you can tell, and I said this before I went into it, but what you have to take away from this game is that Michigan just has to execute more. They got, as we noted, they got past 50 8 or 9 times. You need to execute at least 5 of those times. Whether it's a field goal, whether it's a touchdown, you need to get something out of those drives, and they didn't. So the offense wasn't bad. I mean, before the 50. It's once they got past it where they just shut down. And you have to also remember that they were facing a really good defense. They're not going to face a defense like Wisconsin's until Ohio State. And that's a long ways away. Talking about a month and a half, I think like 7 or 8 weeks away. You're not going to face a defense anywhere near that. So I really don't think there's anything to worry about. If they play that way on offense the rest of the season, I mean, what they faced in Wisconsin was such a good defense under pressure. When they had a third down and short and they had to stop Michigan, they stopped Michigan. Even without Vince Beagle, the linebackers were elite. I think the best linebackers they'll face all season. There's no doubt about that. But again, I just don't think that you're going to see many defenses in the country that are better than Wisconsin's. I mean, I think that you saw that firsthand when you watched that Louisville-Clemson game. And I know that Kirk Herbstreit kind of went on this whole rant about how, well, Michigan is, light years away from Louisville, and Louisville, was inches away from beating Clemson. And, that's a great game. Louisville's still a top 4 team. Well, I agree. Louisville, definitely proved that they're good, as good as advertised. They still lost. I don't care if they went into Clemson and lost. They still lost the football game. And Michigan hasn't. And Michigan has played 2 top 25 teams. Louisville has played 2 top 25 teams. They lost one, and they won the other. One of them was a top 10 matchup. One of them is Florida State, who is probably going to drop out of the top 25 and they lose to Miami this week. Michigan has faced 2 top 25 teams. One of them top 10. They won the first one, and they won the other one. So if you ask me right now, Michigan is better than Louisville. It's pretty much in written word right there. They are 5-0, and Louisville is 4-1. Now I know that you can't really base teams, talent off of their record, and Clemson is this and Louisville is that. It is what it is. Michigan's 5-0. They beat a top 10 team. They have the same resume as Louisville right now. Did they go and beat a top 10 team on the road? No. But I don't invest much into home field advantage as much as I used to. I think there's no doubt that Hornibrook, the quarterback for Wisconsin, was shook because of how loud the big house was, but he was also shook because of how good that defensive line is and how much pressure they got on him. I still think Michigan is better than Louisville. They're just going to, if they were to cross paths, and I think they will. Honestly, I think Louisville runs the table. They beat Houston, and they end up in the playoff. I'll still stick with Michigan landing in the playoff, and I'll still stick with Alabama landing in the playoff, and I'll still stick with Clemson in the playoff. I predicted before the season that Houston would be in the playoff, which got a lot of heat for that. Kind of looks good right now. We'll see what happens, and it's pretty much going to come down to the Louisville game. But if Michigan and Louisville were to cross paths, and I think they do, then it just puts Peppers on Lamar Jackson the entire game. Just have him spy him the entire game. There is not another defender in the country as athletic as Peppers and as good at tackling in the open field as Peppers. If there's one guy in the country that can handle Lamar Jackson, I think it's Jabril Peppers. That's the difference of that game. You have him spy Lamar Jackson the entire game, and that's the difference. I think Jabril Peppers can handle Lamar Jackson, but we'll hit that when we get there. There's still a lot of games left, but I just wanted to know the fact that Kirk Herbstreit going off about that. It's understandable. I mean, there's truth to what he said, but I just don't think Louisville is better than Michigan right now. I think there's 3 teams, maybe 2 teams that are better than Michigan right now. I think Alabama is. I think Ohio State is, and Clemson still struggle with Troy. Sure, they beat Louisville, but they still struggle with Troy. They are beatable. They don't have a great defense. They have a good defensive line, don't have a good secondary, don't have very good linebackers. I think Clemson's beatable, but right now Alabama and Ohio State don't look beatable. I think there's a lot of time left until Michigan faces Ohio State, but until Ohio State shows that they have a weakness in any facet of the game, then I don't think that they're going to win at the end of the season. But that's a long way away. If Michigan goes out and dominates up until that game, then maybe I do pick them. But after, I just need to see more confidence in the offense. I need to see Spate be better than good. He's good, not great right now. He's doing what needs to be done, and that's fine. I don't need him to be a Heisman winner. I don't need to see him be, I don't need him to be Lamar Jackson. I just need him to just a little bit. Let's turn up the notch a little bit. That's it. And you got to see the offensive line be a little bit better in pass pro too. So those 2 things will come. The game against Ohio State's a long way away. It's a long way away. But if you look at the rest of Michigan's schedule, it's at Rutgers, Illinois. The Michigan State game isn't really a good one anymore. Home against Maryland, who's apparently undefeated but haven't faced anybody. Iowa, who's not good anymore. And then Indiana, which could be a trap game, apparently. And then you go to Ohio State. There's really nothing there until Ohio State. I mean, let's be honest. There's No ranked teams. Before the season, this is the tough, this is the hard stretch for Michigan. This is the at top 10 Michigan State, at top 10 Iowa, and then at top 10 Ohio State. Now it's just Ohio State because for some reason Mark D'Antonio can't realize that Tyler O'Connor is terrible, and Iowa just forgot that they were good at football because they are just a completely different team. CJ Beathard looks not good at all. Their defense isn't very good. Desmond King hasn't looked lights out like he did last season. And then Rutgers is terrible. Illinois I think Illinois punted last week with a minute left, 4th and 1, down 6. I think they punted. So, no. And I certainly don't believe in Maryland by any means yet. So, I mean, everyone kind of thought Michigan could run the table in general this season, but now you look at the schedule and the defense, and they're healthy finally. I think they're on the table. So, until Ohio State, then we'll figure out what's going on there. My buddy at Atlanta's 10, Ben Axelrod, when they announced that when the Big Ten announced that Michigan was going to Michigan and Ohio State were going to kick off at 12, he said the Big Ten just announced that the Big Ten East championship game will be played at noon. So I thought that was kind of funny because it's kind of true. I mean, there's really no other team threatening to get those 2 top spots unless Michigan has a hiccup against one of those schools. I still think Michigan State could beat Michigan. I'm not sitting here saying that Michigan State's doesn't have no chance. It's a rivalry game. You saw it with the Devin Gardner days and the Denard Robinson days at Michigan. They went into Columbus and gave Ohio State games. I mean, they almost beat them the year that they won the title with Devin Gardner. But I just think this team's too well coached. I think the defense is too good. Tyler O'Connor might throw 6 picks. He is really bad. I still don't see what Mark D'Antonio sees in him. I mean, the offensive line has to be better, but you just got to find. I mean, if you have to throw him aside to Weaver in there, do it. Why not? Red shirts can be burnt, my friend. Sometimes you have to do it. There's really no other option. When Tyler O'Connor is bad, he is not good. And I've said that since the beginning of the season. I have said that since the beginning of the season, and I have heard everybody else say the same thing. Not just on Michigan's side, but I'm talking all of my Michigan State friends, all of my Sparty friends, all the ones that go there. I have a buddy that doesn't buy tickets anymore because he says he refuses to go until Tyler O'Connor is not the quarterback. And I'm pretty sure he knows him because I think they have a class together. But O'Connor is just, I don't want to go off about Michigan State, but I want that to be a game. I want that to be a battle. I want that, you want to see the rivalry games be as good as advertised. You want to see a game like last season, which I still think until that final play was one of the best ever in that rivalry. You want to see that, but I just don't think you're going to. It's unfortunate because of how they've performed. Same thing with Iowa, too. You're going to Kinnick, and you want that to be a game, too. I still think they play them tough. It's a night game at Kinnick, but they play how they play lately. Not going to be a game. I mean, they lost to Northwestern, who lost to an FCS team and a really good Western Michigan team. Not my subject, but the Broncos could be a top 15 team by the end of the season, honestly. I don't think they're going to lose, that's for sure. So, Rutgers is the topic of discussion for the rest of today's show. You are listening to the Justice Report on the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
Doc and Jock here for Fanatic U. If you're looking for some sweet sports swag and you love your Detroit teams, and I mean you really love your Detroit teams, you got to check out fanaticu.com and get the coolest gear out there and rock your Red Wings shirt, rock your Lions shirt, rock your Piston apparel. Wear it till the wheels fall off. Michigan State, you know what? They got it too. Check out Fanatic U. They have 6 locations all over Metro Detroit. Check them out, fanaticu.com.
Who's got it better than us? Who's got it better than us?
All right, welcome back to the Justice Report on the Detroit Sports Podcast Network. You can find us on iTunes. You can find us on Podomatic. Anywhere that a podcast can be found. You can find the Detroit Sports Podcast Network. We've got Tigers Talk, Michigan State Talk, everything that you need, all your Detroit sports, Lions Talk. We've even got fantasy football, so all kinds of good things going on here. I am pretty much the Michigan show around here, the Justice Report, Michigan Wolverines coverage. Have a blast talking about it. If you guys have any questions, I know that you guys sent me some on Twitter. I'm going to be sure to answer those by the end of today's show. I appreciate you guys being interactive. Appreciate you guys tuning in and all the good words being sent. So this is pretty much impossible without you guys, so really appreciate you tuning in. So we'll talk about Michigan Rutgers here before we move into a little bit of recruiting and then obviously answer your questions and then end the show. So let's look at Rutgers' schedule, probably one of the toughest ones in the country. They faced 3 top 5 teams now, if you include Michigan. They faced Washington at the beginning of the season, Ohio State last week, and now Michigan. So their 2 wins come to Howard which they have a Buffalo Bills logo. It's a little bit of a darker blue without the red, which is worth noting because that's pretty cool. They beat Howard 52-14. Howard is an FCS team. I mean, you can't really invest much into that. And then New Mexico, the Lobos, they beat them by 9, 37-28, which is terrible. And then they lost to Washington in Washington 48-13. They lost to Iowa at home 14-7, which is not bad at all. And then obviously they went into the Horseshoe last week and lost 58-0. So if you're looking at the win that they had over New Mexico, it was a noon game, whatever that means. It was at home, and it was just a tale of a quarter for Rutgers. It was the second quarter that involved 21 points for them. And, I know that everyone wants me to kind of talk about what happened last week when they lost 58-0, but, I mean, this isn't a Rutgers team that's only lost. They have 2 wins. They have 2 wins for a reason, and I think it's just important to look at how they won those games and how Michigan has to stop them, because at the end of the day, it's college football, and anyone can win any given game. So the story of that win for Rutgers over New Mexico was a pretty balanced attack, honestly. Their rushing yards, they had, Martin had 169 yards on 21 carries. And then their quarterback, Laviano, he has not been very good this season completion percentage-wise. He went 11-27, but still put up 152 yards and a touchdown. They actually got out-possessed by 17 minutes by New Mexico. 38 minutes to 21. New Mexico had 21 first downs to Rutgers' 14. Total yards, New Mexico had 462 yards to Rutgers' 350. So you look at this game, and Rutgers should have lost. It just looks like a lack of execution from New Mexico. They outgained them 462 to 350. I mean, I know that New Mexico runs I think they run some kind of option offense, and that's all about speed and outside runs, and it's a high-power offense. But if you're giving up 462 yards to New Mexico, that's why they probably gave up 58 to Ohio State. So they won this game. They put up the 37. 21 of those points came in the second quarter. It was, like I said, a balanced attack, but Rutgers should have lost this game. So Rutgers could easily be 1-4 right now, if New Mexico executes. And it's New Mexico. They're not really the biggest world beater in the world, world beater in college football. But, Rutgers has 3 stars. Janarian Grant played this game. He obviously got hurt during this game, and he's now out for the season, their best receiver. But it's not really any kind of, I say balanced attack between the rushing and the passing in this game, but rushing-wise, 169 of their 177 yards came from one back, Robert Martin, and 94 of their 173 receiving yards came from Jawan Harris. And they only had 12 completions. One of them came from Janarian Grant and a wide receiver pass. 11 of them came from Laviano. So they can't pass the ball. I think they only had 3 completions last week against Ohio State. Rushing-wise, they had 21 carries for 169 coming from Robert Martin, and they had 32 coming from the rest of the group for 177. So they averaged 5.5 yards a carry, which is good. But if you look at that, just look at that box score. New Mexico dominated that game. 17 minutes more, they had that ball. There was a 75-yard touchdown catch from Jawan Harris for Rutgers. That was probably, played a role in the possession being so lopsided. And there was an 80-yard run from Robert Martin. Those are 2 drives that obviously ended short because of how much the 2 big plays, obviously. But Michigan, who kind of has one of those defenses where they give up 1 big play for 9 negative yardage drives, like we kind of saw we didn't see the big play with Wisconsin. We kind of saw it with Central Florida, where the Central Florida didn't get anything the entire game, and then they had like an 80-yard run. But, Rutgers maybe breaks off a big run with Robert Martin. Obviously had an 80-yard one against New Mexico. Maybe Jawan Harris has a big catch. I don't see Chris Laviano having any sort of a success against this Michigan secondary that's not fully healthy with Jordan. Well, they don't have Jeremy Clark, but Jordan Lewis is back. That's your All-American. They also have Brandon Watson, who replaced Jeremy Clark, which I think Brandon Watson had a great game last week. But if you look at New Mexico's schedule, they lost to New Mexico State. They beat San Jose State by 7, so it's not like New Mexico's any good. So a win over New Mexico by 9 when you probably should have lost. Rutgers could easily be 1-4 right now, but they're not. They won. So their game against Ohio State is the one they got to look at closely, because that's the one where everything they wanted to do, they couldn't do. Now, that might have something to do with, Urban Meyer knows how Chris Ash is going to kind of operate his defense, and they just put up 58. But if you look at the offensive side of the ball, Chris Ash was the D coordinator. He had nothing to do with the offense over there at Ohio State. They just did nothing at all. Yardage-wise, they had 33 yards of passing. 3 for 16 overall. Chris Laviano went 3 of 12, and then Tylen Oden, the backup, went 0 of 4. Rushing-wise, Robert Barton had 13 carries for 40 yards. The team in total had 38 carries for 83 yards. That is 2.2 yards a carry, which is not good at all. That is bad. They only had one player catch a ball. Juwan Harris caught all 3 of the completions. So that's probably the guy Jordan Lewis will be guarding. It's my guess. If you look at Ohio State's side of the ball on offense, if you want to hear about it, JT Barron went 21 of 29, 238 yards. Joe Burrow even went in and went 4 of 5, 21 yards. Overall, they went 25 of 36, 259 yards, 4 touchdowns. JT Barrett did throw 1 pick, but they averaged 7.2 yards a catch. And then you look at the rushing side of the ball. This is just where it gets ridiculous. Mike Weber had 14 carries for 144 yards, which is 10 yards a carry. Overall, the team had 53 rushing attempts for 410 yards, averaging 7.7 yards a carry for 4 touchdowns. Johnny Dixon and Paris Campbell, 2 guys you've never heard of, had 1 carry each for a touchdown each. DeMario McCall had 10 carries for 85 yards with a touchdown. And then obviously Mike Weber got the other one. On the receiving side of the ball, they were everywhere. They had 3 players have more than 3 catches. They had 4 players catch a touchdown. There's really nothing to that game besides, 58 points. In the first quarter and the fourth quarter, Ohio State had 6 points and 7 points. In the second and the third, they had 24 and 21. So I guess Rutgers didn't look that bad out of the gate, but that one just got wrapped up rather quickly. 410 yards rushing, 669 yards of offense for Ohio State to Rutgers' 116. We'll talk about Ohio State's defense, and obviously their offense when Ohio State week comes, at the end of November. But Rutgers has nothing to show. They didn't have any turnovers, so that's good, on their 3 plays that went for positive yardage, but 669 yards of offense. Does Michigan match that? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. They are not nearly as polished and ready to put up nearly 700 yards of offense as Ohio State is with JT Barrett, who should lead the Heisman race. Definitely should lead the Heisman race. And Mike Weber, who probably will win it next year, could win it. He'll definitely be a candidate. 600, and that's just absurd. There's no way that I don't think there's any way Michigan does that. Michigan probably will put up about 550, though. Probably will put up about 550 because they're going to run all over them. This running back group has so many different looks, which is very similar to Ohio. If you look at Ohio State's, how they ran the ball, they had 10 different ball carriers. Yeah, they had 10 different ball carriers, which is absurd. One of them is JT Barrett, so they had 9 different ball carriers. And that's kind of similar to what Michigan brought to the table against Penn State. They only had, I think they had 6 different ball carriers, but 5 of them scored. But for Ohio State, they had 4 of them scored, but they had that many ball carriers that, all of them put up pretty solid numbers, except for the bottom 3. They had 21, 28, 46, 85, 144. So it wasn't like anyone was modest by any means. They all kind of went in there and made an impact. They all averaged over 5 yards a carry, besides the bottom 3 who only had 1 carry and 3. So, you're going to see a pretty similar game to what Michigan and Penn State brought. That's what Michigan's probably going to bring to the table on Saturday against Rutgers. They're going to probably beat them bad. Probably by 45-0. I think that was my prediction, was 45-0. That's probably what's going to be. Hopefully, I say 45 because I'm thinking Quinn Nordine, if he's healthy, makes a field goal and gives them kind of a little bit of confidence with him going forward. They have to attempt a field goal. If I'm up 31-0, or if I'm up 28-0 in the second quarter and I'm on the 20-yard line, I will purposely knee the ball 3 times and kick a field goal just to get some confidence in my kicker. Because who cares? You're going to win the game. Maybe not the second quarter. We'll go probably about the fourth. If it's fourth, you're up 35-0, whatever. Kick a field goal. Figure out a way to just kick a field goal. Sure, you can probably score the touchdown, but just get some confidence in your kicker because that's what you're going to need against Michigan State. I don't care how bad they are. I still think that game's going to be a battle. That's what you're going to need against Michigan State. That's what you're going to need in a tough road game at Iowa. That's what you're going to need for sure against Ohio State. If you don't have a kicker ready by Ohio State, there's no way in hell you're going to win that game. If you don't have a kicker, you cannot win tough football games. There's no way. You can beat Rutgers. You can beat Illinois. You can beat Maryland. You can probably beat Indiana unless you're Michigan State because they didn't have a kicker that could beat Indiana. But you can't beat the Ohio States and the road games at Michigan State and Iowa without a kicker. You just can't do it. I think they could probably beat Michigan State and Iowa, but you can't beat Ohio State. You can't win the big ones without a kicker. They almost didn't win the big one last week without the kicker. They're lucky the offense brought a pulse, or not the offense, but they're lucky the defense brought, a pulse that had that ridiculous domination. Speaking of the defense, I had a pretty cool tweet, I guess. I was doing some tomfoolery with my camera, trying to take a picture, and it turned out to look good. So I threw a filter on there or something other. I don't know. I'm not. You know what? I'm a firm believer that if you have a good enough camera, you're probably going to be a good photographer. I mean, there are the photographers that are on the field that are really good. They take some really good pictures, something I couldn't do. But there are just like still shots and things like that. If you have a good camera, you're probably going to be fine. I'm a firm believer in that. That if you have a good camera, you'll be able to take pictures, good pictures. Shouldn't be an issue. So for me, I'm kind of sticking with that narrative where I just took a pretty cool still shot and I put it on Twitter. It was the other defensive line. You can check it out on my Twitter at Land of Justice. It was just a picture of the defensive line. It had, Chris Wormley, and it had Ryan Glasgow and Maurice Hurst, and on the outside it had Taco Charlton, which is weird. I couldn't think of the most obvious name of the defensive line, Taco. But they all retweeted it, and it blew up. It got like 1,000, 1,500. But the point of bringing that up is the caption for it was quite possibly the best defensive line in football. And Jabril Peppers quoted it, and he said, quite possibly, with a thinking emoji, if you're an emoji user, which I am a very active emoji user. It was the thinking emoji, and I wanted to touch on that. I wanted to talk about that. Is this the best defensive line in football? It could be the best defensive line ever at Michigan if they continue to play the way they play. But Michigan won that game on Saturday for one reason, the defense. There's no doubt about it. Putting up 14 points is not going to win you many games, but holding a team to 7 will. And that's exactly what they did. I think if you look into it, the secondary had, the 3 interceptions. One of them from Channing Stribling was just, it was just right there. Hornibrook threw a terrible pass. Why did he throw a terrible pass? Because he was under a lot of pressure. He was shook. And the defensive line mentioned this. I think it was Ryan Glasgow kind of mentioned it. It was Matt Godin. I'm sorry. It was Matt Godin that mentioned it. He said that the defensive line kind of noticed that he was twitching. Hornibrook, the quarterback for Wisconsin, started twitching during the game. And the defensive line got together, and they're like, he's shook. He doesn't know where he's at. He's shaking back there. Like, we got to keep going after him. So they did exactly that. They just kept going after him, and eventually he threw 3 picks. There's no better way to go about that as a defensive line. He's shook, so let's just kick him while he's down. And that's exactly what they did. And that's exactly what they've done all season. Todd McSorley at Penn State couldn't do anything against them. The only quarterback to make this defense look somewhat bad was Sefa Lufau from Colorado. By the way, Colorado looks like a great team while we're here. Top 20. 21, I believe, actually. Sorry, 21. So that was without Jordan Lewis. That was the defensive line without Taco Charlton and Brian Monet. So the other narrative to that is Sefa Lufau went out of the game. And it wasn't just because of one play where, he slipped and now he's done. He got hit a lot. I think he got sacked 5 times. He was, quarterback knockdowns or hits or whatever it may be. 26, I think was what Don Brown said, which is absurd. Sefa Lufau went out of that game, and he's hurt because of how beat up the Michigan defensive line, brought, how much they hit him that game. And you hate to see injuries. I'm not sitting here rooting on an injury whatsoever, but that wasn't one injury. That wasn't one play where he got hit. That wasn't targeting. That was just repeated damage against a really good Colorado team. Is this defensive line the best in the country? I don't know. Let me know. At Land of Justice, tweet me, let me know. And then at Detroit Podcast, let us know as well. Is this the best defensive line in college football? If you're asking me, the amount of just pure, all you have to do is watch the game, and you'll see how good that defensive line is. Taco Charlton's spin move is probably one of the better ones I've ever seen in the history of my short career of watching football of 20 years, because I'm younger than everybody listening, besides my loyal fans in middle school. But Taco Charlton's spin move is ridiculous, and I get tweeted about it at least 3 times a game. And it's hard to remember, I should say, that Brian Monet comes back. And he came back last week, but he played very limited time. Now he's probably going to be fully healthy going into Rutgers. Now you got to remember that he was ranked number 3 overall on the team. Overall, not just the defense, not just defensive line. Number 3 overall going into last season before he tore his ACL last year. I don't know what he was ranked this year, but the kid is really, really good. Really good. And he's just a sophomore. He's just a redshirt sophomore. So you enter him into the mix. I think, yeah, that's my answer. I think it's the best. I mean, Alabama has their defensive line. Ohio State has their defensive line, and those are the only two that are really, and probably Clemson. I think they have a really good one too with Dexter Lawrence and company, but I'd probably put Clemson at 4, Ohio State 3, Alabama at 2, maybe even flip-flop Ohio State and Alabama. I just think Michigan has been the best in the country. I think there's no doubting that Ohio State has the best secondary with Malik Hooker and company, but I think that Michigan's defensive line has just been unbelievable. I mean, unbelievable is like a hyperbole, it's one of those words that you can't really use too often, but it's worth to describe this defensive line. I just think it's really, numbers don't lie. They had 26 quarterback hits in one game. They had, 6 sacks and 3 tackles for loss against Penn State. I mean, that's not really, their offensive line's healthy. Penn State's injured on the defensive side of the ball, but their offensive line is healthy. And then last week, they didn't total many sacks against Wisconsin, but they had they were hurrying the quarterback, I think, every single time for the most part. They didn't really put up the tackles for loss or sacks they wanted. They only have 2 of each, but they had 3 quarterback hits too that, really won't get tallied up. So my answer is yes, but I want to hear from you guys. I want to know what you guys think. You can tweet at me at Landon Justice. You can tweet at the network at Detroit Podcast. I want to hear what you guys have to say about it because I want to hear different perspectives. I want to hear from Michigan fans. I want to hear from non-Michigan fans. Is this Michigan defensive line the best in the country? And then once we get that answer, I really want to discuss, especially after this game that we're about to see against Rutgers today, is it the best in Michigan history? Because it really could be. The 97 team had, like Marcus Ray and all those guys on the defensive line, but there hasn't been many as dominant. But at the same time, if as I'm speaking, I didn't really live through the times of the dominant Michigan football, from the 90s and before. I kind of saw a lot of the early 2000s, but that was more of offensive power than it was just defensive power. I think it was a healthy dose of both. But I want to hear what you guys have to say. Is Michigan's defensive line the best in the country? I'm going to answer your guys' questions now and talk a little bit of recruiting as well. And then we will head you guys into the night game against Rutgers, barring a hurricane, of course. So talking a little bit of recruiting. After last weekend, you saw 5-star Alex Leatherwood come visit. 5-star from Pensacola, Florida, offensive tackle. Like I said last week, I'll continue to stick to this opinion, best in the country at that position. Michigan did something. I said on the podcast last week, I said on many different outlets, I think I said it on a piece for Atlanta 10, and I think I just tweeted it out in general, that I didn't think Michigan had much of a shot with Leatherwood. I think he was coming to visit he gets free visits. I'd take him too. I always note that when kids take a visit, it shouldn't be taken very seriously if their commitment is solid. But after the visit, Leatherwood tweeted out, that was the best visit I had ever been on. That's counting where he's committed. That's counting Alabama. It's counting the Florida Gators, which he's visited, multiple times, and he was supposed to visit Saturday. Obviously, that's changing. They canceled the game against LSU, which is absurd. It's okay to cancel it right now and postpone it, but they're not even playing it. So for me, I'm looking at this Leatherwood situation. Michigan made an impact, but there's still a lot of time left. You want to make that impact now, obviously. There's never a bad time to make an impact on a 5-star, but they made that impact with Devin Asiasi last year with about a week left and ended up getting him. With Leatherwood, they've made the impact now. I still think Alabama pulls it off in the end, but he took Alabama commitment out of his bio. His picture used to be, an Alabama, him in an Alabama jersey, like one of those edits. He took that out. There's really no trace of him being an Alabama commit unless you know the situation prior. I still think he's obviously committed to the Tide, but at this point in time, I still think that Michigan isn't going to land him. I don't have that type of confidence just yet, but they definitely made up significant ground. Not only that, they also made it up with Chuck Filiaga, another guy that I pretty much counted them out on, a guy I didn't think was going to leave. He's from California, he moved to Texas this season, a guy that I didn't think was going to leave not only Texas, but California as well. I think that he was either going to go back to the West Coast or stay in Texas. He didn't do, or he might not do either, because Michigan did a huge number with him as well. And he told me personally that, they really bumped up after the visit. There's been reports that that Michigan could be his leader. I'll go as much as saying that they are, maybe they're not on top alone, but they're on top. There's definitely reasons to believe they're on top. And he's a 4-star. No doubt he's a take. Top 100 kid playing in the Army game. So watch that one going forward. I think his mom had a great time as well, which is super important. So, and then you had Cesar Ruiz, who loved his visit. Still think he chooses Michigan on December 18th. And you also had Jedrick Wills, a guy from Lexington, Kentucky. He enjoyed his visit, I think, just as much as the rest of the bunch. Still think he's an Alabama lock, though. But he really wants to play with Alex Leatherwood. I think they both want to play together. They have that opportunity at Alabama, and they have that opportunity at Michigan. I think it's one of the two. I think it's one of the two for both of them, whereas they had no chance with Wills before. Tried to get him on campus to visit 4 different times, couldn't. Always canceled it. That's your recruiting round up there. I think Jordan Anthony, another linebacker who visited 4-star from IMG Academy. Still think they land him. He's got to get some things figured out. And once he does, I think he'll commit to Michigan. I think there's no doubt about that. And then they obviously got to commit out of the 2018 Emil Ekiyor. There's a lot of smoke to Marquis Stepp right now, and there's definitely some fire to back that up. He's the 2018 4-star running back committed to Notre Dame. Ekiyor really pushing to get him to commit to Michigan. I think that could inevitably happen. He's really interested. He loved his visit just as much as Ekiyor. Ekiyor obviously committed. I think Steps, he's obviously still committed to the Irish, but they're having a terrible season, making some changes on the staff. I think he ends up at Michigan eventually. So I'm going to answer some of your guys' questions here before we round up the show. Also, we asked the question earlier, is Michigan's defensive line the best in the country? You can answer that on @LandonJustice or @Detroit Podcast. We have a poll running. We'll see where it's at right now. So it's got 29 votes right now, and it's at 79% that they are the best in the country. So let's see. Here's some of the questions I have on Twitter. Ian Kuza asks, opinions on fencing the garden and the proposed new early signing period. Great question. As far as fencing the garden, I think I voiced my opinion on that earlier in the show. It's not really working out. I mean, they're getting the 3 stars. That's fine. I think Jim Harbaugh is going to let them keep them. And he'll keep taking, the Drew Singletons of New Jersey. And then the proposed earlier signing period, you saw that earlier this week where the NCAA has put out a proposal to have the seniors or going to be seniors sign. There's going to be 2 different signing periods. Right now it's a December early signing period and then a February signing date. It's a final signing day. Now they're trying to change it to where there's a signing day in the summer and then the final one is in December. If you're not a fan of early offers, you're probably going to hate this new rule because if this does come into play, then offers are going to be sent out super early. Kids are going to be committing, sometimes in the summer, and they're going to be enrolling in the fall. So they'll be, committing in the summer, and the latest they can commit is in December. So am I a fan of it? No. It's good as it is. Let them enroll in December and commit in December and enroll in January. Don't rush the kid's decision. It's already rushed enough. Let them decide in February. It's good where it's at. There's no reason to change it. It's already early enough. So we'll look at the next question here. It's from Al Johnson. He asked, better catch, Jordan Lewis or Charles Woodson? Obviously, this was discussed a lot over the past week when Jordan Lewis made that insane one-handed interception. I don't know. And I've looked over it a lot. It's a tough question. I think they're pretty different. Charles Woodson was very fast and kind of just threw a hand up there and got it and kept the foot in bounds. I think that was probably the best part, was keeping the foot in bounds. Well, it was a very vital part. I wouldn't say it's the best part. And then Jordan Lewis was kind of just like all about hang time. I mean, he stayed in the air for what seemed like 15 minutes and then came down with it. So if I had to pick one, that's tough. I'm going to go with Lewis just because of how long he was in the air and the extension that he had. It looked like he just got that by the fingertips and then somehow brought that into the forearm. He had to be really strong to do that. But then again, Woodson with keeping the foot in bounds. I mean, it's tough. It's tough to go against Charles Woodson, but I'll go with Lewis. So that's from Simdog. He said, to the question, is Michigan's defensive line the best in the country? With the reserves being included, the instant impact of Rashawn Gary, and the skill secondary, it seems that may be true. It's a good point. And somebody else asked, if not, then who else? Seriously, I can't think of anyone. I think Alabama probably gives you a strong candidate to be better. I think Ohio State does too, and so does Clemson. Not many questions today. Mostly just people commenting about the defensive line, which is a good question. Max Syndergaard said yes. Ryan Jones says at the moment, yes. Ryan Hag says, is a pig's butt pork? I'm going to go with yes. And let's see. Let's check the poll for now. It's still we're at 50 votes, so a lot of votes. 82% say best in the country, and 18% say there's better. So a very favorable vote right now that Michigan's defensive line is the best in the country. So I've casted my vote. I think they're the best defensive line in the country, and I think there's a good comment there that says at the moment. No doubt about it. At the moment, they're the best. I mean, they could be exploited at any time. A lot of people have want to say, oh, well, Central Florida had so many rushing yards. Well, they only had 56 passing yards. They ran the ball almost every time. I mean, that's going to happen when you carry the ball like 60 times. So, there has been, and that's when they weren't healthy. They didn't have Brian Monet. They didn't have Taco Charlton. So, I mean, right now, at the moment, fully healthy. Point that out. Yes. With Taco Charlton, with Brian Monet. They didn't have him before. They have him now. Yes. They have the best pass rush, one of the best pass rushes in the country. They have the best, and I can say this positively, the best interior defensive line. There is no running up the middle on them. Doesn't happen. Running outside can happen. Running up the middle doesn't happen, ever. Ryan Glasgow, Maurice Hurst, we're about to see Brian Monet. They don't let anybody run on them up the middle, ever. As far as the rest of the defense goes, I still think this defensive unit is easily top 5. The offense has to get work. I think this Rutgers game is an easy one for Michigan. It's not even a trap game at this point. I seriously think they win probably 48-0. Mix in a pick there, or not a pick, but a field goal, hopefully to get your kicker some confidence. So Michigan does that, goes into the bye week pretty healthy. Hopefully don't get any injuries or anything like that. And that is my prediction, and a final score 48-0. You can answer all of my questions, any questions that you have for me at Atlanta Justice, at Detroit Podcast. You can answer the question, is Michigan's defensive line the best in the country, on both of those Twitter handles as well. You can find all of my work on Atlanta10.com/Michigan, and you can download our app on Apple as well. And you can subscribe to our podcast on iTunes, and you can find it on Podomatic and all the podcast lands that there are. This is Brandon Justice for the Justice Report on the Detroit Sports Podcast Network. Enjoy game day.
Who's got it better than us?